This game is supposed to kill Escape from Tarkov, at least according to a lot of the big names out there in the YouTube and Twitter and interweb verse. So today we're going to dive into that a little bit, along with the help of one of the developers of Gray Zone Warfare, the game in question. Now, the current clickbait for extraction shooters is saying the game will kill Tarkov, and as far as I can tell, it will remain to be a solid choice for the foreseeable future because people love to hate Tarkov and want to see other games do what it does but better. Not to mention it just makes for a super punchy title as you get the best info as quickly as possible, which is why I'm going to be using it. Actually, now that I think about it, wasn't Tarkov supposed to have died about this time last year? And yet the biggest names in gaming still have either played through their wipes or are still playing more than a month after a wipe, which is quite healthy. So when you do the math, no, it's not dead. I'm convinced the only thing that can kill Tarkov is Tarkov, which it very well might end up doing in a number of ways, which I will be talking about in its own video soon, but at least it hasn't happened yet. So in case you haven't heard or seen my previous video on the game, the current name in everybody's mouth for the next contender to kill Tarkov is this, Gray Zone Warfare, a PvEVP realistic extraction shooter that will have a mix of the features we like in Escape from Tarkov, apart from really a major one, consistent PvP. When you go into a raid, like it or not, you will run into players likely in the first few seconds in Escape from Tarkov. If you try really hard, you can make it so that you have a good chance, or almost depending on what servers you're on, a certainty to not run into players. Also something that I will talk about in its own video soon enough, but I didn't want to break the wipe, so I'm going to wait a little bit longer on that one. However, with Gray Zone Warfare here, it's the opposite, it seems. In Gray Zone, you can play the game normally, and according to now multiple devs, play for hours and not run into a single person. What we're hearing about today is how to force the PvP, which isn't going to be too difficult, it sounds like, and sounds interesting, as well as a unique system to the genre so far. Now, you don't need to take my word for it, though. Here is the word of Rick, the PR and comms director for Madfinger Games, the development studio on Gray Zone Warfare. This response stemmed from a question from me asking, what role will PvP specifically play in Gray Zone, and where does the team value it in comparison to PvE? Here is Rick's response, and I'll go over it piece by piece after.
What's up, nice guy? So rather than just typing something out, I just wanted to talk because there's a lot to be said about the PvE and the role it'll play. It plays a very big role in the game because even though you're going to be running into PvE first, the big part of it is the high stakes, the not knowing what's coming around the corner, which is why Gray Zone Warfare, our slogan for the game is every move matters, right? So let's say you're out and you embark and you start in the base, right? It's part of the gameplay loop. That's where you start. Whenever you jump into the game, you decide what you want to do with your weapon modifications, trade, sell, whatever, and then also, of course, selecting tasks with the traders. Now, once you do that and you squad up or whatnot, you go out there. And when you go out there, you're taking on tasks. Maybe you find a loot box. Maybe you find a base. Maybe you find there's this. The greater the challenge in the game and the more you venture off in the map, the more rewards there are. So with that said, let's say you collect really good loot, gear, whatever. Now you got to get back to the base, and all of a sudden there's a player faction coming around the corner. So there's the element of surprise. PvP is a very big part of our game. So while you will, chances are, you're going to run into PvE and spend more time on the PvE side, but the bottom line is that with the PvP, there's going to be certain aspects of the game that we feel like is going to be a bit, I don't know if new to the genre, but that we're kind of doing our own way. For example, one of the things we like is with the healing mechanics, when you lose 50% of your blood, the player will go into a coma, but someone from your team can revive the player, right? That's something that we kind of really like about this aspect of the game, where you're not waiting till they're dead. You can't revive them once they're dead. Once their organs fail or they bleed out, it's over, and then revive them from the coma. The other thing is when the player dies, the squad can actually protect the player's body because it's lootable. So you have basically an hour of real-time life actually in the game as well to go and collect your gear back so you don't lose it, because everything's lootable when you're dead. So that's what we love, is this high-stakes environment, because you don't want to lose everything, right, that you've earned, that you have on you. And even though we do emphasize realism, it's a video game, right? So we want the PvE part to be very fun. We're going to be working on all sorts of things and adding things over time, whether it's every 6 months or whatever, and doing wipes, or not just something like that, but just like kind of big updates. We're going to be in the middle of the map. There's going to be that element of surprise, this history around it, that's going to draw more of the PvP aspect. So as you get better with your squad, and if you're working with your whole faction, PvP is a very big part of this game. So I gotta say, the role it's going to play like I've already been saying, is the high stakes environment, the element of surprise. You could also work together with another faction because we have VoIP. So let's say you want to work together with a faction to help a task they're doing, you help them, then they help you. Or let's say you want to go against the other faction, so you team up with them. You know, there's all sorts of ways that you can play the game, being that it's a sandbox. So the other thing is you're going to get different answers from different developers about this question. And the reason why is simple, because when we want to play it the way we want. I am a big fan of PvP. I love PvE too. I love playing games like Wildlands is one of my favorite games for PvE of all time. But I would have loved to have the element of surprise or the way to work together with more players, not knowing where they're going to be on the map, not knowing if I'm going to work together with them or if I'm going to cheat or betray them and shoot them and take their gear. But remember, you know, again, just like most games where there's an extraction type thing in the game, you're not leaving the map in our game, but you do want to secure your gear safely, which you go to your base. Now, there's going to be other things we add that's going to greatly increase, maybe greatly is a strong word, but we're going to give even more reasons to play our game in more PvP, favorable things as you go on. We've talked briefly about like camps and capturing camps to where it's an area where you can secure your gear. But if you leave that camp, an AI faction or another player faction can take that over, and then you don't have that place to secure your gear. So there's going to be choke points. There's going to be places of interest. There's going to be environmental that we haven't talked much about, places of interest. There's going to be things that attract the PvP more, that you give you more to do in the PvP end. So you don't have to play this game just to do quests. You can work. Now, I encourage it because it's part of progression, but we also have things like PMC progression and whatnot. So PvP plays a big role in the game. We're just saying that from the realistic point of the nature of the open world, and that you're going to have what we're shooting for 1,000 enemy AI on the map, that you will run into PvE. And you could technically spend 2-3 hours without seeing a single person. It's how you play the game, it's how good you are at it, and it's what you're working on. So I hope that helps, man. It's a 5-minute answer. I didn't want to type this up, so let me know what you think.
So every move matters. That is something that will play into the risk reward that we look for in extraction shooters and, of course, Escape from Tarkov. So that is good to hear. However, it is a tipping point. It is something that not a lot of games have been able to figure out correctly, or at least figure it out to the extent that Tarkov has figured it out. Now I'm going to directly quote this next bit here because this is probably the most important part of this answer. So quote, chances are you'll run into the PvE and spend more time on the PvE side. With the PvP side, there's going to be certain aspects of the game that we feel like a bit, I don't know if new to the genre, but that we're kind of doing our own way. You could technically spend 2 to 3 hours without seeing a single person. It's how you play the game, it's how good you are at it, and it's what you're working on. So that is the root of this video. That is what we're here to get an answer on. What is going on with the PvP? And it seems like it's not a forced situation. It just will not be at the same level as Escape from Tarkov, which of course a lot of people value highly in Escape from Tarkov, as buggy and as janky and as cheater filled as it can be at times. So the only thing that has died here is the argument that Gray Zone can kill Tarkov because the PvP, which is such an important aspect to Tarkov, just will not be the same. However, it will be there, so let's continue. When players lose 50% or more of their blood, they can go into a coma and can be revived with proper treatment. If they don't get the proper treatment, they die. Once dead, they are lootable. Another quote here, you have about an hour of in-game time to go back and collect your loot back, end quote. So you can respawn at your base, I'm assuming, and go back to get your own gear off of your body. You can also, of course, I'm assuming, have your teammates cover you, if not take your gear back for you. But that right there is a big deal. You can respawn and go and get back into the fight if there's still one going. As I understand, the point he was making about this functionality is that it is an ongoing fight for the entirety of the what we would call a wipe, because yes, there is going to be wipes in Gray Zone. Not sure exactly how that's going to look from server to server because there's somewhat limited numbers of players per server and accounts and stuff like that. Need to learn more about that. That's a subject for another day. But generally speaking, per server, it is an ongoing fight. So even if you win, the enemy factions know where you live and there's gameplay stemming around that, although unfortunately, it doesn't involve taking out a main base. Apparently, you can't lose a main base. Something that we'll have to see how this works is exit camping or entrance camping, infill camping, base camping, whatever that might look like. Hell, is there even going to be door camping like in Rust? Picture an open world Tarkov where you go and complete a task, and then as you're walking the distance back to your hideout or to the trader to turn it in, you get ambushed and die. But you do have teammates and they're looking over your body, so you can respawn and go back and either help with the fight if it's still going. So win or lose that fight, you will see those same players again. As far as I know, it's it's 16 players per faction, and there are 3 factions on each map per server. So if you guys are all playing at the same time, that is the same 16 versus 16 versus 16 fight going on. Now, the distance from objective to base can be huge, so there's vehicles, and they're also deciding whether or not to add camps, as Rick mentioned in the answer, which would be mini bases that you can store gear at, but it can be taken by other players. When I hear that, I think vehicles mean less chance of running into PvP, as it seems like that's going to be the most unique way to get PvP, unless you happen to go to the same objective as another faction at the same time. But given the amount of objectives, given the size of the map and the amount of players, I can see why it's unlikely to run into players at hours at a time. I think the most consistent form of PvP will be timed objectives, which I'm assuming there's going to be, and then also your routes to and from your base. If you're taking a vehicle, if you're taking a helicopter, for sure, you'll just fly right over them. Whereas a car, sure, maybe you'll get ambushed. I'm not exactly sure where they're going to take vehicle combat, if it's going to be like battlefield levels or what. For all I know, it's a loading screen that you jump into a vehicle and then you show back up at your base. Hopefully it's not that. I don't think it will be. I don't have any information on it, but for all I know, that's what the system's going to be. That's all we've seen so far, really, is getting onto choppers and getting off. And it could be cut screens that we're looking at. We don't know. I'm hoping that it's extensive vehicle gameplay. That would be very cool. There's just a lot that goes behind that, so we don't know. Another question for another day. So then the camps sound cool. I just hope it doesn't turn into a Rust situation where the vast majority of the time you just get raided when you're not there, and then again there's no PvP because you weren't there. It gets messy trying to figure out a workaround that, whether it be you can't raid or they're offline, or timed features around what you can and can't do for raiding, or how you get all of that loot back to your base if you are the one that is raiding. If there's AI guarding it, like I said, messy. Now, to be clear, I am super excited to try out this game simply because it will play out essentially as Armor 3 Anti-Sazi with PvP, which I love, and will be covering this on the channel for that reason, but it doesn't stand a chance in killing Tarkov. We've already established that. The reason why is because the PvP will not be as consistent, plain and simple. As of right now, I think it will still be fun, and it will be worth a try for every single Tarkov fan, actually, for sure. But if you're playing Tarkov for the PvP as it stands right now, I don't think this will be your vibe. It also just will not kill Tarkov, and the devs don't want it to, so it's going to be a different game. If you are interested in Gray Zone Warfare, let me know, and also hit me with any other questions or topics that you might want to explore. The devs are great at responding to questions, as well as just giving us all of the information that we're really looking for in terms of understanding the game and what they plan with it. But to support what I do, check out my streams, check out my Patreon, check out my other channels for other games right here, and click the buttons on the screen. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. See you guys.